The best coaches in the game, we really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing these puzzles, occupy the chunk of the pie. Ain't no lie when we hit the block, helmets, casket is top.
Welcome back, everybody, to the DFS Army Bold Call Waiver Wire podcast. I'm Alan Seslowsky. I'm the host, and I'm here with a special guest to help me take through it. Fantasy expert. I'm calling you an expert. You know what? Because I've seen you play, Brandon, and I'm here with Brandon Adam on Twitter. What's up, Brandon? Say hello to the people.
I am excited to get this going. Season long says, let's get after it.
Yeah, and for those of you who are not familiar, Brandon is one of the more prolific players fantasy football. How long have you been playing for, Brandon?
I would say probably 7 to 8 years now.
Yeah.
Close to that.
Yeah, well, and he's mastered the game. I'm in a few leagues with Brandon, which is why I brought him on. And, you know, you've seen on this podcast for the DFS Army members that watch us regularly that, you know, we bring in some experts from SiriusXM, from all different other websites, and they have great takes. But sometimes you find a little gold hiding under a rock over here. And I always enjoy your take on things, how you interact on Twitter. So I think that the DFS Army will benefit greatly from having you on. So again, thanks.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So we're gonna the focus of this podcast today is to let the people know which waiver wire pickups for their season-long league are the best pickups, which players they could drop, but we're going to also have an overlying conversation and just talk about a few different situations. First and foremost, Brandon, what is your strategy on the waiver wire going back to week one? Talking about like a FAAB redraft type of setting. Are you someone that spends your money early? Just how do you handle the waiver wire as it goes through the season? What's your strategy?
I actually usually, unless there's a major injury where it's a bona fide handcuff that is like clear cut and dry, I kind of tend to save my money a little bit towards the middle and end of the season for the playoff push. Because usually if your draft went well, you don't have to work the waiver wire early like that so much. But I like to prepare for the playoffs earlier than most.
So you like to have the hammer at the end. You like to be the guy that can have any player he wants, like basically at this point forward.
Yeah. I like to steal players from people and hold them so they don't get them. So that's a lot of my strategy as well.
Yeah, pay attention to that. If you're watching this podcast, that's an underrated strategy, playing defense on the waiver wire. So if I have Zeke Elliott and you and I are competing pretty heavy, I'm in fourth place, you're in second place, and Pollard becomes available, I can't get him. You don't even need him, but you go and you're okay. So I like that. That's actually very different than what I've been telling the DFS Army. And again, this is what I'm talking about. I've been telling DFS Army, spend that money early, try to hit gold early. But this year, I totally failed. I told them to go all in on Nyheim Hines early. Nyheim Hines, he's gone off on your bench 3 times.
Exactly. It's hard to predict what he's so game script dependent, in my opinion.
And even in those, we could survive committees of 2. We often talk about committees of 3 are a nightmare, and we're seeing that right now. All right, so let's talk a little waiver wire. This week, it's a little thin on the waiver wire, but there's a couple players. I mean, we just brought him up. Nyheim Hines, he had 28 PPR points. I mean, even after he goes off like that, he's about 40% owned. Usually we try to focus on 35% owned, but he's available in some leagues and some competitive leagues too. Is he a player at this point that you're going to use that strategy and go all in on?
Yeah, especially if there is, I would actually definitely put in a FAAB of probably 35% for Nyheim. He actually has a pretty good role cut out, like a McKissick role almost, for the Washington role. I think Nyheim could definitely help out and separate yourself in the flex. And if you can time it, that's the biggest thing.
But here's the thing, and I think that Hines is almost like one of those old school like Deshaun Jackson boomer bust guys. Like if you're putting him in your flex, I'm okay that he's going to have a 3-point game because most guys you're picking up at this point are either going to be like 3 points or like 10 points. And now if he's a 3-point or a 20-point guy, a 20-point guy can win your week for you. So if you put him in there and he fails you, that's fine because he's one of those rare running backs that is boomer bust that can get you the win. Now, you brought up McKissick. McKissick's 48% owned, so there is a chance he's out there. This would be the last week you can get him. I mean, yeah, so he's you'd prioritize, because I forgot to tell you, what we do on this podcast is I go through the guys, I put them up on my waiver wire sheet on DFSARMY.com, and then we sort through them on the podcast, and I re-rank them after the podcast. So you would have McKissick above Nyheim Hines if he's out there on your waiver wire.
100%. You can just see that they have a real role for him, and he's out producing wide receivers from the running back spot, and he's got a defined role. I like guys with defined roles.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And are you worried about Antonio Gibson?
No, I think they work off of each other well. Antonio has been able to do everything he's been doing with almost a 50% snap share. So going back to college, Antonio is so used to being on the field and having to be efficient. I think he's okay with that. And I think McKissick is so different in the passing game that they have to use him. So for this year, McKissick is going to have a lot of value towards the playoffs.
You're listening to the DFS Army Waiver Wire podcast. I almost forgot at the top to remind everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're getting some value out of this, or on Twitter, on Facebook, one of the many places we're streaming to, give us a like, give us a share if you're so inclined. If you're getting some value from this podcast, that's a good way to support the podcast. If you'd like to become a DFSARMY.com VIP, you could sign up for the rest of the season and even into some other sports. Basketball's coming up. Use code SEZ, S-E-Z, get 20% off. I'm here with Brandon Adam. Brandon, give out your Twitter real quick.
Brandon D. Adam 19 on Twitter.
Okay, definitely give him a follow. He has some good tidbits. A passionate football fan. All right, going down the rest of the running back list here, Brandon. Salvin Ahmed, which you and I, we liked him, and we saw the juice in him. You and I are both dynasty players. He was known in the dynasty community. Now it's funny to hear like people calling him Salvin Ahmed. Have you heard that? Like,
yeah, I have.
Yeah, and
heard that.
You shrug, right?
Yeah, I just say Salvin.
Right. But I'm saying is like in my head, I'm like, oh, is it? But then I look, I'm like, it's Salvin Ahmed. Yeah,
Ahmed, yeah.
But he looked good. Now Myles Gaskin, when he was the starter, nobody expected him to be the starter. Everyone thought, we were fighting over Jordan Howard and Matt Breida, who was going to be the better 7th round pick. The answer is neither. Gaskin was fine, but he didn't do enough to like say it's his job when he comes back. Salvin Ahmed, how would you prioritize him? What confidence level do you have in him? Talk about him a little bit, and what bid you would suggest DFS Army members watching this podcast put out for him.
So Myles Gaskin has a knee injury, so he should be on the shelf for maybe 2 more weeks, right? And if you're making a push, this is the type of player you want for the next 2 weeks and for that playoff push. So if you can flex him out and have the starting running back of the Miami offense, that's something I would go 25 to 30% for as well. That is a difference maker that you can ride until the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, he most likely will get 40% of the snaps once Myles gets back too.
At this point of the season, Brandon brings up an interesting point. We're in week 11. Okay. Yeah. You cannot think about rest of season. There is no more rest of season. There's 1 week and 2 week increments. What's going to get me to the next round? Yeah. Right now, you're the 5 seed, you're the 7 seed. You're just trying to get in the playoffs, or you're the 1 seed. You're trying to protect that bye. Yeah. So Salvin Ahmed is the perfect two. Like Salvin Ahmed, you almost rather have him than say J.K. Dobbins right now, right?
100% in redraft. You do.
Yeah, just redraft only. We're not talking about dynasty or anything like that.
Redraft. Dobbins, you and I.
we'll get into it later.
We'll talk about it later. But yeah. Dobbins has been frustrating, like to say the least. But I would definitely take Salvin over. I would drop JK for him right now.
Yeah,
for the rest of the way out.
So just getting back to the overall strategy, and this is something that if you're listening to this podcast, watching us on this video, we want you to do, because we want you to think about not rest of season, who will be good. We want you to think about who can band-aid you from this week to the next. Now, if you don't need a running back, like Brandon said, Ahmed is somebody you want to play virtual defense on. You want to pick him up. You want to drop some wide receiver you've been waiting on.
Exactly.
Some unreliable up and down guy so your opponent can't get him. Okay.
Or I mean, if you have a kicker, drop your kicker, hold them, and then cut them right before kick, and you hold him away for a week from somebody else. Yep. So 50% of his value is gone.
All right,
So,
for the running backs, I want to push through some of these guys. I'm just going to name a list. I want you to tell me if any one of these pops out to you, or you any of them you just totally not even pay attention to. The rest of the guys on my list are Tony Pollard, Rex Burkhead, Alex Collins, and Cam Akers, and actually Devontae Booker, who's been coming on. Any of those names stand out for you as guys that you're interested in?
man, I liked Cam Akers before the season.
Right.
Sooner or later, he's going to pop, and they're going to have to figure out what he is. And I think he's somebody that you can mess around with. But most of those guys, I wouldn't even touch. Burkhead is trying to figure out unless it's Damian Harris, I don't want a Pats running back.
Right. And now Sony Michel is coming back. He's on my list as well. And those are, those could be a bunch of 100-yard, no touchdown, no catch games. The reason I like them. Okay.
But if I'm a Zeke owner, go get Pollard. If you don't have him now, you go in and prepare for the playoffs.
Right. But doesn't that
give him more run?
Doesn't that also, if you like Pollard because you want to, that's what we tell people: load up your roster with the one injury away running backs. Okay, and you've correctly identified Pollard. But I know that if you've been playing fantasy for 5 years, that Devontae Booker is someone that's not even on your radar, but he has been producing. You never want to bet on a backup running back, but should something happen to Josh Jacobs, aren't we ranking Devontae Booker as a top 15 running back the next week?
I was just going to say, he actually is becoming the defined handcuff for that offense. People didn't know who it was going to be with all the signings early in the season, and they were trying to figure it out. But Booker everybody's got to realize that Booker was highly touted out of college, and he can carry the load if he's given the opportunity and in the right system. And it looks like Mayock, he was a big believer of him. So I could totally see handcuffing with Booker as well.
And it doesn't even matter if we believe in him. Like you just said, if the GM and the coach believe in him, that's good enough for me.
Exactly.
That's good enough for me. Yeah.
It's about opportunity.
Yeah. Now, the only reason I would dispute Cam Akers, and I know from a dynasty perspective, he's 21 years old. We love him. But we already just said we're trying to avoid committees of three. Committees of two, no problem. Committees of three are unsustainable, unpredictable, unreliable. And if they get on the 2-yard line, their best option really is Malcolm Brown. So if we can't count on, Akers is going to have good weeks, but if we can't count on it and we're not getting the goal line, I think that
it's a waste.
Unless you have a completely dead spot in a big league, I would pass on that. Let somebody else. All right, let's move into wide receiver. There's one wide receiver that sticks out to me, and you and I both liked Michael Pittman in the preseason. As a Jet fan, I was really hoping he fell. Obviously, he didn't. This is the kind of wide receiver Philip Rivers likes. He doesn't like a T.Y. Hilton. That's not how he thrives. And we finally got to see the upside. I mean, normally I'm not all for blowing your FAAB on a wide receiver, but talk to me about your confidence in Pitman and how you should tell the DFS Army members to bid on him.
I would go hard and aggressive for Pitman if he's available.
He's only owned in 8% of leagues, so he's available.
Go get him. Go get him, and he is going to have a defined role down the stretch in the red zone. And Philip, like you said, Philip Rivers is getting old. He's not that accurate, and he likes the big, rangy type of Vincent Jackson type role kind of guys. And that's who Pitman really is going to be for him, is that deep shot guy and the red zone guy that he can depend on, that can just out jump most DBs. And he's a huge wide receiver. So I was all about Pitman early in the season. It's just injuries.
Oh, so, we got someone in the chat. We got Bubbles Poupon saying hello. What's up, Bubbles? How are you? Good. Thank you, Jenny. The DFS Army Bold Call podcast. All right. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said on Pitman there. And all right, so we're moving over now to Jalen Reagor and Sammy Watkins. Those are the next two guys on my list. Yeah. Watkins, he's up, he's down, but he is in a Patrick Mahomes offense.
Exactly.
So go ahead, take it from there.
This is the debate between defined role versus the guy that has upside that was touted early in the season that was just injured. For me, I'm such a dynasty guy. I have a big love for the young guys. So I would go after Reagor because I think the opportunity share is coming for his way. I mean, who else are they going to throw to? Alshon Jeffrey? Like that I think Rieger has that upside that I look for in wide receivers that can just change a week in one catch.
Yeah, no, and we both like him going forward, but also I'm a little worried about Carson Wentz moving forward. But they've already said they're going to give Alshon Jeffrey a little bit more opportunity. But yeah, I mean, he's the first round guy. He looks the part. His injury was what was it? His hand? Jalen Reagor's hand was his.
Yeah. It was his shoulder. And
it's his shoulder. Okay.
Then he had his hand.
All right. So that's a little more concerning, but it's not a hamstring. It's not a lower body injury. It's not something that we're overly concerned about. Now, I saw you talking in one of our leagues about Josh Reynolds before the game, that was a guy of interest to you. I kind of I shrugged you off a little bit. I wasn't sure, but when I shrug someone off, my general philosophy is when I'm out on someone in a week, I said, wait a second. If everyone else, not everyone, but if people are in on him, I got to at least take a look at it. What was it about Josh Reynolds that I know you were talking about it from a DFS perspective, but he looked like he could have some staying power in this Rams offense.
So Kupp in that was banged up a little bit coming into last week. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was looking into Josh Reynolds. And I think he is a very trusted veteran wide receiver they have within that offense has been there for a while now. So I think if anybody is nicked up, and he will have an opportunity, and he probably will have some designated shot plays to him, just because he is that explosive kind of player. But I was talking about Josh just purely for a 1 week kind of deal, but it was all because Kupp was banged up going into that game in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, when Van Jefferson was drafted, I think many of us thought that he was the Josh Reynolds replacement.
Sure.
Josh Reynolds has done nothing to even lose that job. They're just going to have depth, I thought. Now, they re-signed Kupp, they re-signed Woods, so we might have to wait a little bit on Van Jefferson, which is fine. Now, one of the guys on my list here is Keelan Cole. Now, Keelan Cole, I love that an undrafted guy. I mean, Keelan Cole popped a couple years ago, fell off the radar last year. Had the big return touchdown this year. I'm never surprised if Keelan Cole has a huge game. I'm never surprised if he has a 3-point game. Are you picking up Keelan Cole or, playing fantasy defense? Where's your confidence in him? Or is he just one of those, let him float on the waiver guys, let somebody else get him?
I usually let Keelan Cole go to somebody else.
Okay. Those type of receivers.
I usually my roster construction, with the only Jags wide receiver I would even use would be Chark. Cole.
The problem with Chark though is obviously this rookie QB took a step back last week. I know it was Pittsburgh, right? It was Pittsburgh. It was windy. It was, so you can't really judge that. But so Cole is not somebody if you needed a third wide receiver in your league.
He could pop at any point. He catches big plays. Mm-hmm. So if you want to take a shot at him, I don't hate it, but I'll tell you I told you so afterwards. If you
totally. So MVS Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So I did, and we've all done this in our league. So it's so frustrating. I correctly identified. I was in one of these 14-team 3 flex leagues, like monster depth league, where there was no one on the waiver wire. And I picked up Marquez Valdes-Scantling, put him in my lineup, and on Sunday, when I heard about the wind, I dropped him. And I ended up putting some wide receiver that scored like 2 points in there, something like that. Right. Process good, results bad. You get when I'm in a points for process league, I'll win it.
Exactly, right. It's just unfortunate that win can scare you off sometimes.
But I think the point is don't get scared off with a guy like that. Meaning like not that he can't be affected, but he's going to be a 2-point or a 25-point guy anyway.
As long as Lazard is out, he is a play to me all the way through. He is somebody that can, like he did this week, was tilt the whole thing by just one catch like that. And he's got Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. It's not some Jeff Lefton, this is Aaron Rodgers, and he's been there in the system for 3 years now. So he should be
Right.
You know,
This is the typical
somebody
breakout
stretched
year.
him.
This
Yeah,
is the typical breakout. And
exactly.
this is exactly what the Packers need. I think he's one of the reasons why they decided not to give up assets for Will Fuller, because they're like, all right, we have to give up this for Will Fuller, or MVS in practice looks, passable for the deep throw. They need someone that can take the top off for to make room for Devontae Adams.
They're the same skill set, and I'm sure being in the system is what won out for them.
Okay, so our guy Van in the chat, he's talking about the quarterbacks, which we were about to pivot there anyway. All right, so usually quarterback in a 1 QB league on the waiver wire is pretty boring. Like this week, for example, normally, let's not talk about the Drew Brees injury just yet, and we're going to get to your question. Kirk Cousins is on your waiver wire. They're playing Dallas. Sure, you pick him up, you put a bid on him. But in a super flex format, we're always looking for anyone with a pulse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but let's talk about New Orleans. Drew Brees is going to be out for a few weeks. Everyone's going to be going hard for Jameis.
Yep.
I'm not so sure that we're not going to see like a QB by committee situation happen here. Are you going hard on Jameis? Are you putting a $0 bid on Taysom Hill? Because no one's going to bid on him. I'm telling you, no one's going to bid on Taysom Hill.
Yeah,
in your redraft.
Actually, I would go all in on Jameis. I think he
didn't look good.
I know he didn't look good, but he's not used to stepping into that role like that right off the bat. He's got a whole week to prepare now. He's been in this league for a while now. He'll be fine. And I think once he gets going with Michael Thomas, he's going to be feeling those vibes that he had with Evans. And I think Jameis is somebody that can lead you to, if you're hurting and you're streaming, I think Jameis is a great play.
So on 31 NFL teams, I would agree. Jameis Winston comes in and he's the guy. On a Sean Payton team, I'm dubious that we're going to see like not just series with Taysom Hill. We're going to see quarters with Taysom Hill.
I think. Oh, you're definitely going to see your fair share of Taysom Hill. But I think you got to have a real quarterback in there, and Taysom Hill is not that. So I think if you're going to invest into an offense, the Saints ain't a bad one to go into. I like him, especially in Superflex, and if he's around.
He's not around in any Superflex. I mean, he could be. I guess you're right. He could be. He could be. Right.
And I actually saw him drop 2 weeks ago, but I think this injury to Drew Brees is a lot more serious than people think. I think that this is going to be a 4 week, 5 weeks type thing.
Do you think Sean Payton is secretly happy? Not because, he loves Drew Brees, that's his guy, but now he gets to experiment and have Jameis and have Taysom Hill. Like, I think this is kind of something that Sean Payton's going to enjoy figuring out.
It's a great opportunity for him to figure out if he has a quarterback in Jameis or if he's going to have to get somebody else to replace Drew.
Yeah. Any other quarterbacks that you think are floating out there right now? I was telling people to pick up Jalen Hurts. Carson Wentz, as I told you, looks a little bit on the ropes to me. Yeah. He's playing hard, Carson Wentz. It's not happening. And I don't even think Jalen Hurts is listed as the number 2 at Sudfeld, but you know what happens. A guy like that comes in, and you could see him being the Tim Tebow type, an RG3 type, someone that uses the rushing ability to win your fantasy championships. If you have room,
you can do a 0 bid and get Jalen. You can just stash him. And like you said, Carson better get going because his coaches aren't looking too hot right now.
Yeah, we got another question in there about Cam Newton available. I've seen him on some waiver wires. Sure. Anyone versus Houston. Cam Newton. Yeah. Just understand that the Cam Newton, the floor is low. I mean, it's not low, but it's not. It's 15 points. It's higher floor than Baker, but it absolutely the upside is there every single week. So yes, Cam Newton is a viable start versus Houston. You agree?
100%. I think that is the kind of game and game setting that Cam could actually have a couple touchdowns. 1 rushing, maybe 2. I think that is a great opportunity.
If he's there, certainly he's a nice plug and play. Would you rather have Cam Newton or Kirk Cousins versus Dallas?
Kirk Cousins.
Okay, so even though that's but that is a choice that you could make.
Yeah.
I would say that there's probably a little bit more upside with Cam, but the floor is a lot lower, where there's a little bit more stability for Kirk Cousins in that situation. All right, how many redraft leagues are you in this year? I know you do a ton of Dynasty, ton of DFS, ton of best ball, but how many redrafts?
I think 5.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
then you know the pain everyone's feeling in tight end this year. If you
Oh,
don't own Travis Kelce, if you didn't own Darren Waller, it's just horrible. But you know what? It's horrible for everybody. So if your tight end gets 3 catches for 40 yards, hey, fine. Hey, Logan Thomas, let's go. He's on top of my
exactly.
list. He's on top of my list this week. Dalton Schultz. I know it started good, but it's with whoever they put at quarterback. I still have faith that Schultz could come through for you in any given
Sure.
week. Those 2 guys are the best ads now. Based on what Kyle Rudolph did last night, would you put him at the top, or would you? How do you rank those guys for Logan Thomas, Schultz, and Rudolph?
Now that Alex Smith has taken over, I would put Thomas up top.
Okay.
I think he has a lot more athleticism and can actually, he gives you a hope he could break chunk plays. Unlike Kyle Rudolph, where it's more like, third down, 3rd and 8, he'll get a few opportunities here and there, and he'll maybe catch, an 8-yard catch, and then he'll have a 20-yard one-time catch that, he just doesn't have the upside to me. I'm always about upside and what's the best possible thing that can happen for the outcome that can happen for this player. And I think Thomas being with Alex Smith, I think it's a big difference.
So here's my counterpoint to you. And I agree that
Sure.
Logan Thomas is 3 for 40 yards, 5 for 50. You're ecstatic. Sure. But I think that when we get into tight end in the context that we're in, we don't need to hit a home run. All we need to do is hit a single. We just want a single. A double would be great. That'll be great. We just don't want to, if we're facing the Travis Kelce guy, let's take him out of the equation. But if we're looking across at our opponent that week and he's starting Evan Ingram, all right, and we're just in tight end hell, I just want someone that's going to give me 6 points in PPR or maybe 12 points and just, that's it. So I just think that I agree with you. There is upside there because of the style of play with Alex Smith. But I just want to get on the board. I had Jared Cook last week in a bunch of leagues. I got bageled. That's what you don't want. It's horrible. But
disappointment.
Right. But, when Michael Thomas was out, when all those receivers are out, you were able to at least feel reasonably good about a touchdown. Now, a player that I think that is an interesting when we talk about tight ends is Jordan Reed, because they have a bye this week. Is Jordan Reed in this tight end world that we live in, is he worth holding through the bye given all the injuries that the 49ers have?
No, I'm actually in that same exact situation right now, and I'm cutting Reed.
Right.
I'm moving on from him. I'll figure out whoever's on the wire. Give me an Akins or something from Houston. One of those guys is going to get a touchdown. You just got to figure out which one it is.
Well, yeah, you're just spinning the roulette wheel there. But that's what I'm saying. Like Jordan Reed, because again, it's not just about this week; it's about next week too.
Sure.
See, I'm in that situation also. Where do I hold Reed to try to pick up one of these Devontae Booker types? But then does that put me in a bad spot? It's an impossible decision. So I can't even tell you you're wrong or I'm right you're wrong. It's one of those decisions you're going to have to make. But I don't think it's a bad strategy to hold Reed, because then at least you'll have somebody that at least has. You talked about upside at tight end. We know that 8 catches for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns is in play with that guy.
Reed is definitely that, but that Dwilly, when Dwilly went off, when I put Reed in, and Dwilly was the guy to actually put in, and it's just they had 2 guys they like there, so we'll see.
Yeah. I'm here with Brandon Adam, experienced fantasy player. Definitely give him a follow on Twitter. He has great takes. He answers questions. He loves interacting with people. Give out your Twitter one time again, Brandon.
Brandon D. Adam 19 on Twitter.
What happened? Brandon D. Adam 18 was taken?
No, 19 is my number in my life.
Yeah. Is it funny we all have like a number?
Yeah.
Like my number was 30. I don't, I think I used to like Dave Meggett on the Giants. That was like how I, so.
Yeah, I'm the 19th. That was my that was a soccer and motocross number 19. So
right,
just nostalgia.
It's funny how we developed like that's our number. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. So, what is we're gonna just pivot a little bit away from fantasy. I got a couple just questions for you. What was your first nostalgic memory of football, not fantasy football? Like when you think back, like when did you get hooked on football?
I think it was when John Elway. It was during the run of John Elway when
Like the late 90s, mid
late
90s.
90s. That watching Brett Favre run around was the coolest things ever. But I actually came back to football. When I was in the service, I really didn't watch football, and so when I actually came back from serving, I got into sports big time, and that was kind of something I did, and now it's just I'm a full blown degenerate, and
I know.
it's just what I do now. So, but football is definitely beating out a couple guys by a quarter of a point for a championship was probably one of my most exciting days.
Yep. Fantasy football is one of those addictions, and I will call it that, an addiction, because if you're listening, you love fantasy football. It's it's frustrating, but it keeps us coming back over and over again. All right. Finishing up the waiver wire portion of this, and I love that answer, by the way. The John Elway years, those Brett Favre years, those are amazing. My early memories of football just go back a little. I'm a little bit older than you, but it was obviously late 80s, early 90s football, video games. But did you play football video games growing up at all?
Tecmo Bowl, of course.
Tecmo Bowl. There's my Tecmo Bowl.
There you go. Yes, of course. Madden. Yeah. Come on now.
What team did you use in Tecmo Bowl?
I liked running around with Bo.
Yes, Bo Jackson, right? And then in Super Tecmo Bowl, I liked the Eagles, but they didn't call him Randall Cunningham. They called him QB Eagles. They couldn't get his license.
Eagles.
Or they couldn't get his name on the license. All right.
That's hilarious.
Streaming defenses, for those who play in the defenses league, a couple that stand out for me. I mean, obviously, anyone who plays the Jets, get them. Get them. Who does Cincinnati play this week? I had him on my waiver wire list.
Washington.
All right, so I think they're live with Alex Smith, who's not the most mobile. I think, and they'll be available. They'll be available. And then the Dolphins play who this week, Brandon? The Dolphins have a good matchup too. I think Detroit. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's you're right.
And with Stafford questionable to play, I think that they're a live play as well. And again, this is a good time from a strategy perspective. You're listening to this podcast. If you're watching this video, go and look out 2 weeks ahead.
Yep.
Okay. Look who the Jets are playing 2 weeks ahead. And sometimes it's better to roster one of those defenses than a backup running back. Like you want to now start thinking, how can I get ahead? And then the kicker, same thing. You just want, by the way, the kicking, I used to go early on kickers. Yeah. Just to get the Justin Tucker, the Harrison Butker. There's like 5 or 7 good kickers now. I mean, it's just unbelievable that you don't. You could now again. I don't know if you're in any leagues that still have kickers, but the ones just I'm in, it's like you could wait a little bit and still get some good kickers. The kicking has been unbelievable. Yeah. But I'm saying it's like you can land on the Giants just re-signed Graham Gano because he hit it like a 57-yarder, and I don't think he's missed more than 1 field goal the whole year. And it's Sanders had just missed a field goal. It's unbelievable, the kicking. All right, everybody. I'm here with Brandon Adam, fantasy football enthusiast, expert, who's always got great takes. Definitely give him a follow on Twitter. Give that Twitter out one more time.
Brandon D. Adam 19 on Twitter.
You almost said at Hotmail, right?
Almost at Yahoo.
That's right. Yep. And go give him a follow. Definitely good interacting there. All right, everybody. We're going to just remember, if you want to come over to DFS Army, we have our VIP. You can get 20% off. Just go to dfsarmy.com. Use code SAYS. You'll get 20% off, and you can interact in our Slack chat. You could talk with all of our coaches in the DFS. I mean, is it unbelievable what the Geek and those guys are doing with DFS right now?
The sheer amount of content they push every week is just insane.
And the results. I mean, they just had a couple weeks ago, Bobby Wow won another $1 million. I mean,
I know it. I want to be that guy one.
Yeah, I mean, he won it last year also. I mean, to win. Someone said, "Oh, he just got lucky." And my favorite response on Twitter was the Geek said, "The first time or the second time he got lucky."
Exactly, right? Yeah. There's something, if you're hitting in those kind of tournaments, it's not luck. You got to really put some real thought into correlation.
There is luck involved, of course.
It's a skill.
Right. Yeah, so that's the point. Come over to DFS Army. You become a plus EV player. You can interact with our coaches. They really do help you get to that next level. They can't make your picks for you, but they can give you the process, give you the secret sauce on how to cook in your own kitchen. You're a hardcore Seattle Seahawks fan, right?
True that.
Yeah. Are they making a playoffs this year?
100.
Okay. Only because the NFC is kind of like a haves and a have-nots
I believe I still believe once Carson comes back, that offense is going to be different.
Yeah.
It's just I think we might have to survive one more week without him because we'll get a long week after the Thursday game for Carson. So Hyde, if he comes back, that's a name that you might want to check out for a running back plug for a week.
Is he? He might be out this week though, right? Carlos Hyde, he's back
Pete Carroll said in his presser yesterday that he has a really good chance to be back this week.
Yeah, positive Pete though. You know what I'm saying?
I understand, but it's better than Alex
not.
Collins.
It's better than not. Right. Alex Collins, I think we mentioned him briefly when we went over, but I think he's a pickup just in case if you have the roster room.
If Hyde doesn't make it, he is a 100% play.
I mean, it's cheap advice. Stash everybody. You can't stash everybody. Don't you love that when self-included, by the way, I give out the advice, stash that guy. You can't stash everybody. We only have 5 bench spots, and
exactly.
Maybe 7 if you're in a deeper league. All right, Brandon, you did it, man. You came through. You spit fire today, man. Thank you for joining the DFS Army Waiver Wire podcast. Remember to check out all our content. Again, I implore you, if you like this video, if you got some value from Brandon, go give him a follow on Twitter. If you got some value from watching this podcast, hit the like button right now. Go ahead, hit the like button. Click on the retweet. Click on the share button. That helps us out so much, like you don't even know. That's how you pay us. You pay us by giving us that support. Leave a comment in the video. We absolutely will comment back. Until next time, Bram, we're going to have you back. If you'll come back, hopefully you'll come back later this season or in the off season and join us again. I'm Alan Seslowsky. Give a follow on Twitter at Alan Seslowsky. Go follow us at DFS Army. Until next week. And also, back on our YouTube channel, last thing I'll say is tomorrow we are rolling the Geeks Vegas Lines, our signature podcast where Statsational and the Geek give out the best DFS strategy for the week. All right, everybody, until next time, goodbye.
Got the best coaches in the game, we really ain't playing. We regroup up in the Slack chat where the coaches debrief. We be piecing